It's the True Penny Show
with your host, James True Penny.
Hello and welcome to the True Penny Show. Beginner's guide to Japanese wrestling, if you will. Kind of. And a bit of Puerto Rican wrestling, and definitely some American wrestling. We are talking about the life and times of Stan the Lariat Hansen. This is part 2. If you missed part 1, we did that a couple of weeks ago. And if you go back on the True Penny Show archive, you can find us there on SoundCloud, on Stitcher, on iTunes, on Spotify, on YouTube, wherever you get your podcast from. And my partner in crime on that particular podcast was from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. His name is Mr. Marcus Green. How are you doing, sir?
Good. We had to come back and do part 2, man. Legendary Stan Hansen. You can't just fit all of his full birth of his career in the one go. So we had to double it up.
Basically, what I did was, as we got later into his career, I took at least one match from every year, and tried to get as many of the big stars that he faced in that particular year on the playlist. And the playlist is available on YouTube. It's on our channel. We will attach it to the playlist. We already had success with the playlist because the playlist had more viewers than listeners to the podcast last time we did this podcast. So we're winning. We picked the right things. That's good. And we're going to open this with World Wrestling Council in Puerto Rico. We're in San Juan Baseball Stadium, and the legendary Carlos Colon, and equally another WWE Hall of Famer, defending the WWC Universal Championship against Stan the Lariat Hansen. Now, there is reasons why Stan's Puerto Rican stint was cut short, and we will talk about those at the end of this. But this is kind of your classic Puerto Rican brawl. We're in a baseball stadium, Stan's the heel, Carlos, as always, is the babyface, and it starts with violence and it keeps on going. Marcus, what did you think of that? Because this is kind of like throwing you in at the deep end of deep Puerto Rican wrestling lore.
Yeah, because I
Yep.
think Mr. Colon came up on here twice. But even in that, so that's Carlito and his brother's father, huh? Where that legendary bloodline comes from. So yeah, I think the back halfway of him, honing and building up to that legend, and then once we got towards the back half of our first show, he was really had honed that Lariat, or beginning that the legend around that Lariat, and here we're seeing it being utilized in full force. But as I said in the last one, he had a career facing some guys that were not diminutive, thankfully, because he would have ran right over them. And I think, Mr. Colon very much stood out on this list as somebody who Hansen had a hell of a time with.
Everybody had a hell of a time with Carlos. It was.
Yeah.
We have to do more on World Wrestling Council. There are obvious reasons, and Marcus might not know the story because you being a more modern wrestling fan, the place kind of got blackballed out of wrestling in the late 80s and years after this. But you just have to look at this crowd. What is it, 30,000 people in a baseball stadium to see a wrestling match? And this was regular. This was every couple of months. This wasn't just like this wasn't just like a WrestleMania kind of moment. They would do here. They would do by a moon. They would at the anniversary show in by a moon. They would do another big show in San Juan whenever they kind of had a hot feud. Carlos wrestled Andre the Giant there. He wrestled Bruiser Brody. He wrestled Abdullah the Butcher. All of the big names of hardcore wrestling of the 80s, and just the best brawlers he could find. Because the formula was very simple. Everybody loved Carlos. Carlos was a smaller guy, could get loads of sympathy for being a smaller guy, and you feed him Monster of the Week. And Carlos bleeds a lot, and everyone goes home happy. Realistically, that's basically what happened, and it was breathtaking professional wrestling to watch. It's just so simple. It's just so easy. It is just like you get your top babyface, you push them to the moon. They have to be not too worried about like bleeding a lot and have to be pretty tough. But after that, away you go. Off to the races, make as much money as you like. It's just genius professional wrestling on a core level. and Puerto Rican fans were rabid. Yeah, because it's still
Yeah,
real to
man.
me. Damn it, it was absolutely real to them. I would have killed Stan if they got close enough, to be honest. So yeah, it's a very raw, emotional form of professional wrestling. It's very simplistic. This is not even close to what Stan's career was like in All Japan as far as technical wrestling or even kind of like power wrestling that he did over there. He's much more of a kicking heel, as we say, in this particular sense. He begs off an awful lot. He's not the continuous motion that you see, the perpetual unsinkable battleship, as the Japanese fans called him. He's much more vulnerable as a heel, and I find that's an interesting juxtaposition that he could pull this off as well.
Yeah, and as this, continue to go down this list, there's many of his that were his size, and in some cases maybe wider than he was, which was a rare find going up against Stan. Um, they very much that battleship mentality very much came into play because you've seen them. They couldn't directly get to the bowels of things. They
Yeah,
kind of had to take out the guns, if you will, when it came to him, and kind of really somebody you really just had to try to break down and outlast. And some people did it better than others, and some people didn't. But his ability as a heel to piss off not only his opponent to a point of not really caring about a DQ, as well as the audience, is a rare find in
yeah.
today's
This
wrestling.
match ends when Stan clothesline, or lariats, I should say, Carlos, with a loaded elbow pad. But the commissioner of the World Wrestling Council comes in and reverses the decision as a disqualification. And that sets things off in motion because obviously then you've got to have a rematch. Because of course you do. Yeah, that's how you make money.
Yeah,
Stan ends up bleeding like a stuck pig. Carlos is bleeding all over the place. Everyone's going nuts for this match. Oh, let's do it again. Why not? Now, Stan did end up winning the Universal Championship in WWC, and that was kind of the story of that title. Obviously, Carlos Colon was kind of the Ric Flair of this particular territory, and they ran a babyface champion on top for a long time. But I've got an interesting second match on here because, like he said, he wrestled some of the biggest names of the territory area, and there wasn't much of a bigger name or star attraction than the Missing Link, who was a guy who was part of Devastation Incorporated in Texas until he turned into a babyface. He was a big name in the Carolinas, and he was one of those ridiculous gimmicks of the 80s. He was obviously billed as a person who was not really human. Ideal for Puerto Rico. Your referee, believe it or not, is of course Bill Alfonso. Because of course it would be Bill Alfonso. Bill Alfonso refereed for everybody. You got two English wrestlers. We need an English-speaking referee. He's only in Florida. Let's get him down here. There you go. What do you think of this one, Marcus? Because this is a different change of pace again.
yeah, I appreciated it because the whole thing, like I said, once we get to the section of it, it's like as he was coming up, like a lot of his opponents would, that grit grime, just classic Stan Hansen, um, really just the brawl that you really just had to get in the pit with him and hope you can get out. And then they kind of had to work their way back. A lot of these guys met him where he was and made him really push some of his limits. And I think even under 9 minutes, the missing link really showed that you know, don't worry about the name or the look. You're gonna have to really put me down. So I was impressed because giving Stan a fight takes on a different
Yeah,
meaning when you're in there with him.
Missing Link was
But he
great.
did.
Loved him. He's absolutely a product of the territory age. Always had a manager because he obviously couldn't speak English. That would blow the gimmick, wouldn't it? And this was a kind of classic example of a Link match. The fans loved him. He was a big old brawler. He could go, and Stan had someone he could go with. This is a completely different match to the one with Carlito Carlos Colon because they're both guys who just don't really sell much. There's not a lot of motion here. It's just a big dumb wrestling match in many respects. There's nothing wrong with that. and the fans love them. It's great. It's a fantastic piece of wrestling, just on a
Yeah.
different level from the match we've seen previously, which is all about storytelling and emotion. And this one's just how hard can we actually hit each other without breaking anything? Very hard is the answer to that question. And yeah, thoroughly enjoyed this match just for the outer worldliness. Because this playlist is heavy stuff. It's emotional. There's matches on here that are like draining to watch. They're long. So this was a nice kind of respite before we got into the meat and
Yeah.
potatoes of this particular match. Did you recognize who the commentators were on these two matches? Hugo Sabanovich of the Spanish announce table in WWF.
Not these two in particular.
And currently of the
These are
AAA Spanish announce team. Obviously in Triple H, just the announce team.
Yeah.
Yes,
Which
they
now
hired him back
under
by accident.
under the umbrella. I guess that brings everything
So
full
Hugo
circle.
got his break as a commentator in World Wrestling Council, but he isn't Puerto Rican. He's Ecuadorian, as I just discovered when I looked him up. So yeah, this was a big fun match, and we'll not spend too much time on it because it is a bit of an outlier in comparison to the other things on this playlist. So let us move on. We're going to go back to All Japan Pro Wrestling, and it's 1990 now. Well, actually, before we go on, we should actually explain the reason why the Puerto Rican stuff came to an end. So, in 1988, Bruiser Brody went to World Wrestling Council, where he was a big star, and got into an altercation with their booker, Invader One. Now, the accusations against Invader One are that Invader One stabbed Brody, and Brody died. Which obviously, generally speaking, would be leading to a murder charge. But Invader One didn't get tried for murder. He got tried for manslaughter and was found not guilty, even though there were witnesses saying that he did stab Brody. That pretty much put an end to a lot of the North American stars. Sorry, the United States stars. Certainly, a lot of other North American stars did go to Puerto Rico. Stop them from going there, basically because of Invader One's involvement with the company. And Stan Hansen was very sad because Bruiser was his best friend and his longtime tag team partner. He wrestled the Real World Tag League that year with Ted DiBiase, who just finished up as the $1 Million Man. And it was an emotional return to All Japan for him in 1988, where he explained his love of Brody to the fans. And the fans really couldn't hate him anymore in Japan for that, because they love Brody too. And while Stan was always mean and vicious and Stan Hansen, he was always beloved by the fans from that moment onwards. It shows a marked change in what was going on. We're looking at the second match now. Obviously, this was a year before that happened. This is Carlos Colon versus Stan Hansen in 1987 for the World Wrestling Council match. Title match, I should say. This time we're back in San Juan Stadium again. Sorry to put that downer of a message on there, and we can maybe pick something out of this match which puts a nice cap on Stan's Puerto Rican career. What do you think of this one, Marcus? Because this is obviously a slightly different fare, because we've already had the one title match. We're a year down the road, and this feud has not reached its crowning moment yet.
Which is crazy because of how classic his match. Like Stan Hansen versus I'll Be Your Huckleberry, because that's all this match was. Carlos Colon just giving it back to him, and it was crazy to watch just how much, even without the English commentary and whatnot, like just seeing how much the crowd loved anytime felt like Colon was gonna had the upper hand and was gonna win. And yeah, this was a fight. This was definitely a classic match between these two. And yeah, like I said, it felt like Colon was one of those guys that Stan just really had to be careful with. To the point where there was a couple times that you really just didn't know. Setting him up with a power driver didn't go. So a couple times it just didn't go. But a lot of these matches felt like a lot of wars of attrition for him in a good way. That really set up what you said would really become his final moment with that Lariat, because it would be almost 30 minutes of like genuine war, and then it'll come down to the way he kind of surprised him with that Lariat. So yeah, but this was like this was insane. Like Carlos was absolutely like felt like the Cody here against the much hated Stan Hansen, which I guess you can akin it in today's time with somebody like a full heel Randy Orton in that regard. But
Absolutely, it's well
yeah,
worth a
just
watch.
good stuff. He gave Stan
Just
all he could
for the
handle.
intensity of it. It takes a while for Stan to get going as the heel because Carlos is on top, which it just shows you how
Yeah.
giving Stan is. Like we've seen Stan wrestle bigger guys and not sell for them at all. And
Yeah.
he understands what the business is here. Crowd. In the first video we see Carlos and Stan just in the bleachers. There's no one on the infield, and it's the same stadium, and they've packed the bleachers and the infield for this match. That's what they've done in the space of a year. That's how over they've got, and that's remarkable, really, isn't it?
That's crazy because it's hard, in today's time, you've seen certain companies do it. They find a hard time filling up, smaller stadiums in certain instances. I just did a show with a friend talking about the rise and I guess the very quick fall of GFW, and looking at some of them some of them shows that they was trying to run in some of those baseball fields, and it was scarce. You know, then it just shows you, like you said, the fever pitch it had reached, and the popularity of somebody like Stan being absolute uh, bad guy, and then somebody like Cologne who was, really the all time hero. So,
Yeah,
different
and I think
different
that's
game back then that wrestling was in.
the thing about like wrestling these days is it's really difficult to find people who are just straight up and down heels get this kind of visceral response. I mean, there's people like MJF who are heels, but you also know they're massively popular because of the way they kind of caught the line between
Yeah.
being a heel and being a babyface. And I think that's one of the fascinating things about the Death Riders is they are just heels. Then there's no other reason for them to do the things they do. And I think that's the difference between Stan Hansen and this
Yeah.
particular mode of his career, especially when he's wrestling in North America compared to where he's wrestling in Japan. Where in Japan he's just a mean and vicious guy, whereas in North America he's a bad person. I think that's really a fascinating kind of switch that the two characters have. He essentially is two different people on two different continents.
Yeah, that's which is also weird because he's portraying, very much a beloved idea of being a cowboy.
It is kind of like
it's the
prototypical Texas wrestler, The old school Texas wrestlers wore a cowboy, wore a waistcoat, and they did bulldogs, and that was all you need to do, right? Dustin Rhodes' finisher used to be a bulldog because he was from Texas, and that's what you did. He obviously wanted to be kind of separate himself from Dusty, but he was from Texas, therefore he had to have a bulldog as a finisher, and that's the way it was. And Stan takes that stereotype of what a Texas wrestler could be and does everything. Does the chaps, does the waistcoats, does the cowboy hat, the chewing the tobacco and the cowbell and the whole 9 yards, but is so not a Texas wrestler at the same time. Like he becomes a prototype for people like JBL, and he becomes a prototype for Texas wrestlers to come and Southern wrestlers to come. If you see what I mean, Mansa in TNA, he's kind of like based around the Stan Hansen prototype, and there's a few other people as well in the current indie scene who are kind of based around what Stan Hansen did, and they have Stan to thank for taking that original kind of like babyface stereotype and turning it on its head.
How much do you think it also did for the image in terms of, because I don't think
Yeah,
that's what get
I
judged
think
by that
I
too.
think
I would
yeah,
imagine
I
that
think
helped in,
it's
necessarily having
interesting. That
people
time period
geared
of wrestling
so much
in
towards that
general is
Adonis.
interesting
So the,
because you don't get guys like Stan very often, or Brody, 300 pounds, tall but not overly tall. You have your Undertakers and Sid Viciouses and people like that who are 6'8", 6'10", Dan Spivey even, and 300 pounds. But Stan's 300 pounds and he's 6 foot. He's square, right? He's blocked up, and he doesn't have a Greek agonist body, and he doesn't look. He does look like a wrestler in the sense of an
yeah,
old school wrestler, like he looks like a wrestler from the 1960s and 50s. But he can go, and that's the big difference. He's not a big lumbering guy. He's a guy who can drive a match forward with just sheer kind of will. He can wrestle a smaller guy and make him look good. He doesn't look overly dominant. We're looking at Carlos Colon here. He can make this match work with that body type. But equally, he doesn't. Yeah, he's got that. There's a lot of guys who Dustin would be an example, I suppose. He's not as much as he looks amazing for his age. Dustin's never been like a Greek Adonis style wrestler, has he? No.
no, he hasn't. And he's a really good example, like you said, in the light of somebody like Stan Hansen. He's got some nice size on him. He's tough. He doesn't do anything flashy. Doesn't need to because everything kind of just works. And it's only gotten better as he's gotten older, which is crazy because in a lot of ways, and I think he's recovering now from a surgery or something. But in a
Yes,
lot of
and
ways,
he's
he's
absolutely like
probably in better,
as good a wrestler now as
not
I've ever
just
seen
shape, but
him, and
in
I've been watching
ring
him for
shape
30 years.
than
He's
than
not lost
some
a
a
step.
lot of
And
younger guys.
Stan,
So
one of the amazing things about watching this video is there is a change in Stan Hansen, but not by much. Over this video, kind of this playlist runs for like a 15-year period, and you do see him slow down, but not much. He comes at things from a different angle, but he's not any worse than he was in. He's not any worse into the year 2000 than he was in the year 1995. It's just different delivery because he's trying to do different things. I think that's actually remarkable. I think that's the remarkable thing about Stan Hansen is we talk about Flair and we talk about Steamboat, and not so much Steamboat because he kind of stopped when he should have done, but Flair and a few other guys who went on too long, Hogan, and it's he doesn't look like he needed to stop. Yes, he did. He needed some knee surgery, but he didn't look. He didn't look.
yeah,
He stopped at the right time, and he was still an active main event wrestler for the majority of his career. Maybe the last year or two he wasn't, and he got downgraded then because they
yeah,
needed to bring the new guys up. But that was it. And that's a remarkable run, isn't it? Like that's your first main event run is Bruno Sammartino in 1976, and your last main event run is the Real World Tag League in 1999. That's
yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, but that's I mean, you say that, and we're gonna continue to go down this list. But look what all he did, all the places he went, people he faced. Like I said, like you said,
Yeah.
he's faced some of the best to ever do it. Legends. Um, and he found some multiple soulmates, not only as opponents, but he found a soulmate in a partner in Brody. Um, and a lot of guys, rarely find that, an opponent, much less, holding a style that becomes their own, where they can have a career over, 15 years or more. That really
Mm.
kind of saves them. When you somebody like Stan, it's it makes it so much better being a heel because you're not another guy in the ring in a singles match that's also trying to get that proverbial essence, if you will. So it really leaves a lot of room for you to make the guy look better, while fighting from behind, and then come back and just be as dubious and as serious as you want to, and that just works so good. Like that just devil may care. I really don't care right now. Attitude, I'll clothesline you. The ref can anybody that's running in here can get it. Um, it's just that attitude that just permeated. He really didn't care, and also when titles were on the line, there were of the more intentionality in certain ways, but he really just kept that I don't care personality type. And why it
Yeah,
looked like
absolutely.
Molly
So
like
we're
his
going to
weight
move on to the next
fluctuated, he
match,
put
which
good,
is a championship
good
match.
styles
Stan
on
was the
him.
Pacific Wrestling Federation heavyweight champion, which was the top belt in All Japan Pro Wrestling in 1987. In this match that we're watching, he is defending against Yoshiaki Yatsu, who had an interesting career. He started off as a New Japan wrestler, left New Japan with Riki Chosu during their invasion angle of All Japan, which was kind of, as we've discussed on the Tribute Show before, kind of an invasion angle, but really Inoki couldn't afford to pay them all, so he said, go set your own wrestling promotion up, it'll all be fine. And then they went, we've been offered a job by All Japan, shall we go? And Inoki was like, yeah, go on then. Apparently, that's what Keiji Yamamoto and Riki Chosu said on a shoot interview I heard once. So they ended up in All Japan by accident. um, yeah, because that's the way things go, because wrestling promoters run out of money. He ended
That's
up being
hilarious.
an All Japan loyalist and was very, very close with Genichiro Tenryu, who will play a major part in this particular playlist as we come to. Now, this is late 80s All Japan Pro Wrestling, and it's a very different style to what comes along in a couple of years' time. But Stan Hansen is one of the architects of that style. This is much more like traditional All Japan Pro Wrestling in the 80s, which was low on impact, was more like a traditional North American wrestling promotion. It was kind of closer to what you would see in the NWA. It was an NWA affiliate. You would get Ric Flair and Harley Race and all of the big names over. Kerry Von Erich would go to All Japan as well. There was an affiliation there, but it wasn't what the Kings Road style that we kind of know would become, and that's kind of going to be the dominant theme of this particular podcast, because Stan Hansen, Akira Teyu, Masawa Panta Kobashi, and Wada were the guys that built that style, along with Steve Williams and Terry Gordy and a few other of the main eventers of that era. But we're kind of gearing up to it, and at the minute, it's pretty stiff because it's Stan Hansen, but it's still kind of a more or less a straight up and down wrestling match. We've got rest holds, for instance, and the intensity that we will bring into this playlist shortly will be a marked consideration. But the plan is already there. You can see it in the layout of this match. And for those of you who don't understand the Kings Road style or know about the Kings Road style, the Kings Road style was based around the fact that you had to grind a guy down enough to get your finisher to work. And if you didn't get your finisher to work, then you had to have something else to back it up. And that's the basic principles. You had to chain enough maneuvers together to get the better of the next guy, which creates all sorts of story concepts based around moves and about achievement and all of these things that make wrestling great. And it's a very linear way of doing it. Now, that made incredible matches, which we will be talking about, but it had its limitations, which we'll be talking about too. But getting back to this match, because I've talked an awful lot, Marcus, what do you think of Honor, Mr. Yatsu, and this particular title defense?
This where, really get into, like you said, the meat and potatoes of it, because this was, like I said before, we kind of see guys chopping down those redwoods, which Dan really felt like at times. Yeah, why wouldn't you target this man's arm? You know it's coming. You know what it can do. You know what it's going for. One hit you with the Lariat and it's over. So, why wouldn't you target? Why wouldn't you target his legs? A man that big and sturdy, he can't stand, pardon the rhyming, but he's only half a man at that point. So why wouldn't you go there? It's just very few times that you're going to be able to just stand toe to toe with Stan and then outlast him. So you need to break him down. And like you said, the King's Road style is just really just grinding that body part and wearing the guy down, a ref hold, making him have to kick out, which creates more exhaust, more energy. It's what you hear today. Like so many guys kind of wanted to get back to, but once you've taught the audience a certain way, they expect what you've taught them. So now we're kind of living in over here in the way we're kind of living in near fall mania with all, where you don't have time to grind it down, because you really got to get to the point in the match where people are either telling you fight forever, this is awesome, or everybody's on their feet. So just like you said, this is just that classic thing that you appreciate about the real bare bones of it, and that's what made these guys different. That's what made this era so tough but so rich in the fact that there was no room to even question about the fakeness of it because these guys were sweating bullets. They were selling because you didn't have no choice. The guy's been putting his knee on the wrong part of your arm for the good part of the 5 minutes. You didn't really have no choice but to sell. So that's where
Ed
the
DiBiase calls
realism
it a
didn't have to be
three-quarter shoot.
implemented. It was just there.
Or it's gonna hurt
Man.
like hell because it's just gonna. And it's incredibly stiff style, and this is, like we said, we're not quite at the peak of the King's Road yet, and there's some matches on this playlist which are just intense. But I put this one in to give everybody kind of a reference point to see where we are. The next match is for the PWF Championship and features Terry Bam Bam Gordy challenging for the belt on the way to the unification of the Triple Crown. So this is 1990. It's July 1990. The championship, the Triple Crown Championship, is yet to be decided. We're getting closer to it. And there's circling thoughts that all the belts will be kind of put into one championship. And Terry Gordy and Stan Hansen are key players in that process. At this particular point, Stan is now a strong babyface, especially going against Gordy. He's also probably the top gauge in at this particular point in time. Now well into the idea of the King's Road style, because Genichiro Tenryu and Jumbo Tsuruta are still the top guys in the company. Gordy is the top gauge in. Hansen is flicking at his heels, is still an incredibly important member of the roster. And Gordy's tag team partner in the Miracle Violence connection, Dr. Death Steve Williams, is also very present, not only on this roster, but in this match. This is the year that the Violence Connection would win the Tag League in the final against Stan Hansen and Dan Spivey. And Steve Williams makes his name known in this particular match as well. This is a lot closer to what King's Road would become. It's a lot stiffer. It's a lot more athletic. There were very few wrestlers on planet Earth as good as Terry Bam Bam Gordy at this particular time. He'd had all of that time in Texas to hone his craft under Kevin Von Erich. Sorry, not Kevin Von Erich. Fritz Von Erich. Choose Michael Von Erich wisely. All the feuds with the Von Erichs. He'd been part of the Freebirds. He was the total package main event wrestler at this time. He'd had time in WCW feuding with Steve Williams. So this is kind of 3 years after the fact with the match with Yatsu. What do you think of this one, Marcus? Because there's a definite up in the pressure cooker, isn't there?
See, if there was another person that he could have got tagged up with, it would have been interesting to see with Gordy. Because he was just another one, man. Like, and that had to be like the worst combination to face, like a Texan that was honed in Japan. Because like the softest thing about this guy may be his entrance, and that's about where it stops. And then you just gonna get like this stuff not even proper holds. I'm just gonna hold my forearm with my other arm and just put it in your face. Not even proper necessary hold, which is from a technical perspective, that's what just made just such a grinding affair. Like it looks exhausting because it's like.
And old school wrestling.
But ironically enough, this is how you also probably get broken in at a proper wrestling school. Yeah, when the person who owns it gives the person that breaks the kids in gets told like see if they got it in them to do this, because if they can't, like you're gonna get like, you don't want somebody sitting on you for 5 minutes with their head wrapped around you, arms wrapped around your head like a python. You quitting because everything's getting tight. So yeah, this is another instance where you see the smart strategy dealing with Hansen of like, look, we can have a tough off, but ultimately I need to break this guy down. And going at his legs and this and that and the third, and the chops, the slaps. Some of them were chops, some of them were slaps. Some of them chops that got turned into slaps. Like it's really that grinding, that grit, like you said, kind of honing that King's Road style of just really grinding it in the direction leading towards the climax being the finisher. Because
if
back
you
in
if
those days, the
you
finish
if
was
you
only
did if
something
you
you needed
didn't
to hit
get it
once.
right,
So that's the one
that was it.
concept. Now
And
I
you've got to
feel you,
try
but
again,
yeah,
and you've got to put some more moves together to make sure you get it right, or you've got to come up with something in your back pocket to make sure you get it right. And that's what
yeah,
became the story of the King's Road. You know, can Kobashi chain
exactly.
enough maneuvers together to beat Misawa? And that's a 3-year story. That's 7 matches. You know, how can he beat this guy? And that's what this was all about. And Gordy and Hansen were 2 prime examples of how to make this work on this level. Just because they're just so tough. Just because you can keep beating constantly. And this was a big year for All Japan. This was the year of Wrestling Summit,
Yeah,
where Stan Hansen wrestled Hulk Hogan in the main event at the Tokyo Dome. Rumor has it, there's all sorts of rumors about it was supposed to be Terry Gordy, but Stan persuaded him not to do it so that Hulkster could wrestle Stan and he'd get the payday, and told Gordy, don't do it because you're going to be the champion. If you can't have the champion losing to the WWE champion, that would be bad. Though Hansen has said no, that didn't actually happen. There's all sorts of rumors floated around that main event because Baba was an interesting place for Giant Baba to be because he got New Japan, WWF, and All Japan to work together to fill the Tokyo Dome. Explain that one. It's like we have a hard enough time now with AEW working with New Japan. Anywho, this match ends up when Steve Williams comes down to cheerlead for Terry Gordy and distracts the referee by pulling Gordy down to the floor so that Stan can't deliver the lariat. Well, there's things you notice about this match. The main thing I noticed about this match is when Stan goes to pull his sleeve up his elbow and the crowd just go crazy because they know what's coming. And to get a move that over is just insane. Now, he's worked very hard to get that move over, and other people working for him have worked very hard to get that move over. However, you know, that shows you how much love they have for him and how much they knew what it was all about. And everything was based around that lariat and Gordy's powerbomb, and how can you avoid one and land the other. And that's what this match is about. Have you any other thoughts on this, Marcus, before we slip on to the next one?
no, it's just like it just interesting. Like immediately how it stood out is one of his absolute toughest opponents, and this is coming off of, like I said, Mr. Cologne, where it's like he absolutely like to feel like I'm pretty sure he popped off a low blow on Hansen in that match, and it was just like that's crazy. But that's again, Hansen is somebody that will even get a baby face to a point of like, oh, okay, I'm done playing Mr. Nice Guy with this guy's getting me nowhere, and
Oh,
he's
yes.
literally pissing me
So in
off.
the summer of
So,
1990,
but
Stan
yeah,
Hansen was
but it's
contacted
funny coming off of a
by World
conversation about
Championship
Adonis
Wrestling
because
of
this
Atlanta,
next match,
Georgia, where obviously Stan had wrestled before in the old Georgia Championship Wrestling days, which is now part of WCW, to come and wrestle and have a series of matches with the total package, Lex Luger, who was then the US heavyweight champion. This was the first era I saw Stan Hansen in personally. Because back in the day, we used to get WCW on late night TV, like 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, on the different regional TV shows around the country. And we got an aerial so we could record the different shows because they do 13 weeks in one area and then they do 13 weeks in a different area. And I've got VHSs in the cupboard I'm sat next to you right now of Stan Hansen in squash matches. And he would just come in and destroy his opponents and get disqualified. And that was it. That was all he did. He would just, to get heel heat, he would just destroy people. And then he started tagging with Sid Vicious, and between them, they just destroy people. It was fantastic. It was just big dumb wrestling. Just like did it to get heat, and it worked perfectly. To the point where he got a shot at Lex Luger, and this is kind of like an All Japan match displaced into Halloween Havoc 1990. It shouldn't be here. Though Stan is still like a heel here. He's not working babyface at all in any way, shape, or form because Luger is a massively over babyface. And funnily enough, Dan Spivey comes down and does the favor for him that Steve Williams did for Terry Gordy a couple months before. It's slightly bizarre. It echoes itself. We also have the joys of Jim Ross and Paul E. Dangerously. Paul Heyman to you, sir, on commentary, which is a wonderful walk down memory lane. Marcus, what did you think of this?
interesting to see him on WCW. um, and seeing
Mm.
Lex Luger, I guess it seeming in his prime here, because obviously he's had to get back to a certain point in recent years in his real life. Shout out to DVP, who's doing literally working miracles. But yeah, to see him at this stage and doing his thing and having to come up against somebody like Hansen, who at this point has been through absolute
Mm.
wars. And I think that's another thing, going through this play, which was great to see him get titles and whatnot. But Stan never really came on like somebody who needed a title. He was just like the definition of a disruptor in the best and worst of ways. Best of ways because of what he brought out his opponents and the business he do. But was man in the worst of ways because like man, like I was really hoping to a finish to that match until the referee got intentionally killed. Um, but yeah, it's interesting because, like I said, we just came off that conversation talking about like those Adonisville guys versus, Hanson, who, had his own, practically had his own lineage of guys who would follow, who, really didn't need to be those boxing guys because they built tough in a different way. And then you got Luger here, who
Yeah, this is
very
it's
much
just
taking the fight to
it's
Hanson in his
interesting to
own
see
way,
his
but he's a
approach to
different
American
style of
wrestling,
opponent to the
and
one
it's
that we just got to talking about. So.
it's not that far removed from what he's doing in All Japan, except for the fact it's different to what his approach to Carlos Colon, because obviously Carlos is big over babyface and much smaller than he is, and I think he had to give him a lot more, whereas Lex is obviously about the same size as Stan is, except it's muscle. And it therefore Stan's kind of like grinding on an awful lot more on top, and it kind of suits that All Japan style. And Luger was at this stage was about as good as he got. He was clumsier when he was younger. He wasn't a great in-ring worker when he was younger, but this was kind of like if you gave him a guy who could go and he could prove his athleticism, he was in just the right spot. And this was he just turned babyface again because the Horsemen were back and therefore they needed more baby faces. And this was just kind of like perfect timing for him to be US champion and as a babyface up against Stan Hansen, who was a guy who kind of sweetened the pot on like that babyface run because Lex had been a heel for quite some time before this, and kind of a loner in many situations. And this gave him something to really get his teeth into about being a babyface again. And I think it kind of set up Lex for the rest of his WCW run before, and certainly set him up to be a world championship wrestler because of this feud with Stan Hansen. Shall we move on to the next one, sir? Yes, this one is kind of I put this one in as a nice nod to the legends. This one is a really interesting one because it is Andre the Giant and the Funk Brothers, obviously, who trained Stan Hansen, and going up against Stan Hansen, Down Spivey, and Terry Gordy in a six-man tag. This is Andre on his last All Japan tour. This is the very, very end of his career, and he's moving very, very slowly. But again, it just shows you how much respect the wrestlers have for Andre because they just bump for him. They just look after him and make him look like a star because he's Andre, and you can't mess with the legend of Andre, can you, Marcus?
No, he's a one of a kind guy. Like you said, you slow down at this point, but the guy's a literal giant. It's only going to be so long. We've seen so many different incredible generations of athletes since of various tall assassin and whatnot. But he was a literal phenomenon of his time, particularly in his sport. And
Yeah, absolutely.
he
And
did
this
really
match is the
he
story of an
could
elbow
with what
drop.
he had,
That's the whole thing,
but
right
it
there.
was one of
It's
those
just an
situations
elbow
where
drop.
he
That's
wasn't going
all
to
it
leave his
is.
feet much, but when he did, it had to
The match
matter.
goes along, and Andre does his thing, and you can tell Andre loves wrestling still. After 20 years in the business, he's in pain. He can't really move as well as he used to, but he's going for it. Why not? Like last tour, he's probably ever going to do is tagging with Giant Baba in Real World Tag League that year. This was an off-night match, and it's just fantastic to watch. It's just great wrestling. Just to see. And again, Dory Funk Jr., who's in a similar boat. He's at the end of his career as well, though. Dory Funk Jr. was having matches last year in his late 80s because he's Dory Funk Jr. And who's going to stop him? Yeah, and yeah, this is just a bit of a fun aside, really. But I wanted to kind of show the level of respect that the Japanese fans had for him and in the situations he got put in. You know, Spivey and
Yeah,
Hansen would be finalists that year in that year's Real World Tag League. But not an awful lot else to say about this match, unless you've got anything else to say, Marcus, and we can move on. Next up is the fact that Stan is in Mexico City because he wrestled for the UWA and he's cutting a promo. I couldn't find any UWA matches for Stan Hansen, but it's just a little aside again to prove like how much he
we can
wrestled
move on.
everywhere. Just he was one of those guys who worked the international circuit, and UWA had affiliations with New Japan and All Japan. And UWA was the company that wasn't CMLL. It was kind of AAA before AAA started. A lot of the guys from UWA, when UWA closed down in '91, ended up in AAA because they didn't want to work for CMLL. And UWA was a promotion that featured a lot of American stars and was kind of a high production promotion in comparison to CMLL, which tended Lucha Libre, and that was about it. So just a little thing in there. So we'll move on to the next match, unless you've got anything to say about that, Marcus.
Yeah, it was interesting with these promos because this was just Stan, and again, to your point about really putting over that Lariat. If the last match was a story of the elbow from Andre, Stan had the story. Things building towards that Lariat. The one thing you don't want, the one thing you don't want to see, even if you know what's coming, you can't stop it and you can't beat it. Everybody else is duplicating. Everybody else is imitating, but they can't duplicate what I do in this range. Just ornery, nasty, and chewing that horrendous uh, tobacco, which just made him come off even more nastier. Uh, yeah, it was cool to see, and like you said, you didn't really probably almost did yourself a disservice back then being isolated in the spot because, like you said, the connections between the companies, it not being so dead heavy and that cult mentality that seems to unfortunately have developed. Uh, that's really what made him a legend. He went everywhere, did everything like you said, being one guy here and another perceived another way there, but still maintaining that level of tenacity and toughness. And yeah, this was just a really great thing, and in a lot of ways that we don't necessarily see anymore, like
Yeah,
cutting a
absolutely.
promo
So next
in a
up,
real
we're going to
space, not
go
a studio,
to a classic
running
All Japan
towards the
matchup
camera in a
of the
real park
1980s, set in a
somewhere and whatnot.
1990s style.
It just
We've
the
reached the point
ambiance
where the
helped.
Triple Crown was created between Jumbo Tsuruta, Stan Hansen, and Junichi Tenaru. Tenaru decided it was time to go. He left All Japan Pro Wrestling to go form Super World Sports with the help of one Vincent Kennedy McMahon. And that promotion is a whole entire different story. And we've told it a few times on the Trupany Show down the years, and we will probably do that again. So this one is kind of like the two top guys in the company at the time. Younger guys, the four pillars of All Japan Pro Wrestling that are to come, are still working their way up the card. Hansen and Tsuruta are the guys. They're it. At this particular point, Terry Gordy is sadly had a health issues and is on his way down the card in All Japan Pro Wrestling. Steve Williams is there, but not quite ready for a singles run yet. So it's Hansen and it's Tsuruta and it's for the Triple Crown. And we've seen them wrestle each other before on this playlist in the 80s style of All Japan. And Tsuruta is one of those guys who reinvented himself in the opposite direction. We talked a lot in the past about like guys like Jushin Liger who, due to injuries and due to long-term issues with health, to slow down, drop their aerial work, not work as stiff, be more of a mat wrestler, be more of a striker, try and keep the distance, do things differently to make themselves a compelling wrestler. Tsuruta went in the opposite direction. After being a guy who was a mat technician in the 1980s, he was always stiff but fair. He was never particularly hard on any of his opponents. He has a reputation of being a very smooth wrestler. He's placed with this option of keep doing that and become irrelevant, or go with the new tide. And he becomes this unbelievable main event wrestler that can pull incredible matches out of everybody and can run the Triple Crown at the moment they most because their biggest draw has left. And Tsuruta, who is beloved but never quite on the same level as Tenaru, suddenly becomes the face of the company for about a year. and has to carry the company on his shoulders, along with Hansen, to the next level when the next crew are ready to come in and take over. And Tsuruta goes at the job like a man possessed and has matches that are so stiff. And that last 5 years of his career are ridiculous for the level of quality that the matches he has, and the change in style going from a super smooth technical wrestler to a straight up and down brawler in the babyface tradition of All Japan. This is fantastic. This is just absolutely incredible. And Hansen is just there. He just continues to never stop. That reputation of the unbreakable, the unsinkable battleship is built in his matches with Tsuruta. And this is a phenomenal piece of work. This is intense. This is a wrestling match which is only 20 minutes long, and it's a main event. I think we're at Budokan Hall. It's packed. It's absolutely rammed. They're on their way to $1 million gates at Budokan Hall at this point, and it's just showing you how good pro wrestling can be in this environment.
Yeah, story for this match, pain. That's just it. It's pain. Time to get down to it,
Yeah.
and Tsuruta confidently and very smartly, again, targets that arm in a great effect because he had to do it twice. Dad didn't get enough stank on it the first time. He had to do it again. And by the time he got the pin, he was so exhausted. Feel like he barely got out of there, and he barely did. But what a hell of a trophy. So yeah, that's the kind of wars of attrition you appreciate. And he's in the post match interview, absolutely just best relationship he got is with bandages and ice because he earned every bit of that victory. And yeah. So these are the matches. The other match on the card, I say you definitely go watch. After the didn't get no easier, and it's why he's maintained that reputation because
Absolutely.
if you
This
beat
one
him,
is
it says a
special.
lot.
You have to go
You know,
see this one.
so
It's
and then he will continue to
Tsuruta
go against
sadly no longer with
some
us,
of the
and he
Japanese most
passed away
notable
because of
names that
cancer.
have been
But the
greatly
legacy he
mentioned
leaves
throughout
behind, and we should
the
really
history of
do
this
a
show.
Life and Times of Jumbo Tsuruta at some point. And there's so many we should do. It's difficult to pick sometimes. It's a bit like the Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame. Who do you leave out is the issue. And it's just a special moment in pro wrestling, and it really shows the sea change that Giant Baba was making in professional wrestling, in the sense of the guys that leave for Super World Sports leave a massive hole in his roster, and he's got to fill it, but he can't do it straight away. So it's Hansen and it's Williams and it's Jumbo, and how we're going to make this work. And we hold the ship together by giving it everything we got for 12 months until these have got a chance to go. And when they come up, boy, did they go. So let us enjoy the rest of this podcast, or the rest of this playlist. We move on to the next match, which is a Triple Crown match. We're going to skip forward a little bit. We're in 1992. It's April. It's Stan the Lariat Hansen, who is now the Triple Crown champion, wants to relieve Tsuruta of the title. And he's defending against Toshiaki Kawada. Kawada has come up through the dojo. He has been knocking on the door throughout the 80s. And with Tenaru leaving, his mentor in the dojo, he's part of the Tenaru Revolution. With his mentor leaving and him staying put, he finally has a chance at the big one. And the big one is the Triple Crown. We're at the Budokan Hall. And this is the point, like I said, $1 million gates of Budokan were a regular occurrence at this point. They would sell out Budokan the night this show happened. The next Budokan show in 2 months' time. They hadn't announced the card, right? 14,000 tickets sold on the promise of there just being a wrestling show from All Japan Pro Wrestling. They didn't know what the card was. They just knew it'd be that good. So they spent the money. And that was Baba's philosophy, was if the wrestling's good enough, they'll show up. 14,000 a time. 6 times a year. He didn't like doing the Tokyo Dome because the tickets were too cheap. He'd rather do Budokan and sell tickets at like $500, $200 a ticket for every seat in the house. Made more money that way. And people would go. And they went, and they went, and they went. And this is the most successful financial era of any pro wrestling company certainly until like the mega TV deals that we know of today. This was, as far as pure house is concerned, this was as good as it ever got. 14,000 people, sellout crowd every time they went. And the reason why was because guys like Kawada and Stan Hansen just tore the house down and gave it everything they possibly could. Because we're in the intense zone of All Japan Wrestling in the early 1990s. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, and that's just good business, obviously, like you said, running the other venues for higher prices, um and you can bank on that because you can bank on your talent. But bangers were guaranteed with guys like Stan, like you said, was a mentee to John Masruda, and with him on his way out, and then Kawhi having to prove himself, and you know very much taking himself the task by Stan Hansen, who very much put him through all the paces you would imagine. Um, Showing this young man just how tough he was to the point, but he's the one that's fallen, which which tells you everything you really need to know about
Oh, he was.
Stan, and just
You can see why Eddie Kingston's
the
his
tall
hero.
task that
He's
he
the hero
was
of
to
Eddie
bring
Kingston,
down.
can't he?
That Kawhi is popping off
It's
kicks,
tough.
but every time he's the one that's falling.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
it's just
Eddie
crazy. And
Eddie
just seeing
loves
him now putting
Kawada.
his leg lock
And
on
Kawada
him with the
was
stomps and kicks to the face.
he was the
Stan was
hard
just a different breed
taskmaster.
of tough.
He trained Tai Chi. He's the reason Tai Chi is the way Tai Chi is. As we discussed on we did a
Makes so
show
much
about
sense.
Tai Chi and
Makes
all
so
the
much
issues
sense.
Tai Chi had in his career, and his biggest issue was the fact that he was trained by Kawada. Kawada is just absolutely phenomenal at this point in his career. Baba didn't see an awful lot in him when he was younger because he didn't like the fact he was doing it, to be honest with you. He wanted his wrestling to be more of a classical North American style, and he kind of like saw kicks as something New Japan guys did. So he didn't like it. And then he realized actually this guy's got tons of charisma and he can really wrestle and he's double tough. He's kind of the guy I want. And then all of a sudden, kicks became a much bigger part of what All Japan was about. And he evolved style. And you can see it in this match because Hansen just starts kicking back. Hansen sees and adopts and does. And that's really interesting to me.
Yeah, that's perfectly said. That's exactly what made it so fascinating to watch. Even if it felt like he was out of his element, he just switched it up. Was like, okay, you want to go after my leg?
Mm.
Let's see how yours hold up. And it felt like he always had an answer for everything. That he didn't like him kicking when that's really such
No.
locking up them hamstrings with them kicks. It's a real thing. Like I said, rarely did people ever do that. If they did, they had a foreign object. And even then, because it was Stan, the match wasn't over. So a long night was all really. Stan was somebody you had to make miss. You had to make mistakes, which was rare because rarely did he make mistakes. But you had to extend period of time, and you had to switch it up because he was very good, like you said, at adapting on the fly, which you would think somebody his size with his reputation and his particular style would very much like to
I think one of the
favor
guys that
towards
kind of
one
like
direction. But
really took
if
that
he couldn't
on
get you
board
one
is
way, he
Samoa
gets you
Joe.
another, and he just
Like
leads you right
that
back to where it
that
always
obviously
ends,
Joe's
which is trying
not got a traditional
to
kind
take your
of
head.
pro wrestler look in the classically cut body sense, but he has got that classic pro wrestler look of just being a bigger guy. And he takes on Hansen's ability in the sense of Joe can do things that guys his size shouldn't do, and Hansen is kind of like the prototype of that. Later on we watch tag matches in here, and he's 43 years old and he's throwing drop kicks at 300
Yeah.
pounds. Perfect drop kicks, pinpoint on the chin drop kicks, because he hasn't done it for years and he just pulls it out because he can, and because people don't come to see Stan Hansen throw drop kicks, but he can do it if he wants to. That's the whole point, isn't it? It's like I've got so much. You just see me as this big guy that's just double tough, but I've got so many tricks up my sleeve. Yeah, exactly. You're not expecting it at that point when he's supposed to be gassed up because he's 300 pounds, but no. If you're in a match with Stan Hansen and it's got to go 25, it's going 25, and
then
all
even
of it's
more
going
than
to happen.
that, he do it late in the match, which made it even more effective. So, if he is not.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of a junior wrestling in the heavyweight realm, so obviously he did a lot more aerials than there was a Misao was as well. But you wouldn't class them as aerial classicists. They just kind of did stuff off the top rope. They weren't like, Minata or anything. But you can see in this match, as you watch this match, how over Kawada is, because we're at Budokan Hall. That's a concrete building, right? All the pillars are concrete, all the walls are concrete,
Yeah.
and the fans are cheering and stomping their feet so much it's shaking the camera on the hard cap. That's insane to get that much vibration going. That's just madness. It's another special one like the Saruta one. It's one you have to see because it encapsulates what All Japan in this era is all about. It's just so stiff.
Yeah.
And the fans are absolutely on their seats. And we were saying, like, the near fall-itis of modern wrestling. What, we've had 3 pinfall attempts as we've watched this match in 20 minutes? We ain't near that yet. We aren't at the point where pinfalls are going to work yet. So there's another one,
Yeah. And like I said, yeah, see, in modern times now, we live in a thing where if you don't do a near fall, you're not doing it right. Um, so and
Absolutely,
it's yeah, and that says a lot of because obviously Japanese crowds are very respectful. When they get rowdy, you doing everything right. And another, it's showing it's such a great display of just how rarely do we see nowadays because everybody got to get their stuff in and they'll take a power drive and they double like Mario after you eat. But here, Kawada is suffering just trying to get offense off on these guys. Is why
yeah.
I have such a great time watching somebody like Ilya Dragunov. He makes going through the pain of it. So yeah, this was just a great showcase for somebody trying to overcome Stan Hansen and build on their own legacy at the same time. But again, that kind of always comes down to running that damn Lariat. You've been jumping all these hurdles, and that's just the one wall you can't run through.
I watched the DDT show this week, Ultimate Party, and I reviewed it with Michelle Kane. It was there, and the main event was Yuki Aino versus Minoru Suzuki, right? And DDT, like most of the promotions in Japan that aren't New Japan, comes from a King's Road background because Shingo Takagi-san, who runs the company, was an All Japan trained wrestler, so everything's King's Road style. And that main event, Suzuki versus Ueno, is one of the most fascinating main events I've seen in a long time because it was so simple and it like an old All Japan match. It wasn't quite stiff, but it was. Here is Ueno, a exceptionally good-looking, athletic young man. Here is Minoru Suzuki, the greatest submission wrestler who's ever lived. Go. That's it. That's all you need the story. We know that story, right? That's why you go, right? That's why 5,000 people went to Sumo Hall to go see that wrestling match because you knew what you were going to go see. You want to find out, can Uno survive Minoru Suzuki? This isn't going to be a wrestling match. This is going to be an exercise in survival. Can he live through it? And that's one of the few matches I felt like this year that kind of echoes this kind of style of wrestling in the sense of our next match is Steve Williams versus Stan Hansen, and this is a very similar match. Now, Steve Williams is nothing like Yuki Ueno, that Yuki Ueno can be thankful for that because he's too small to do the things Steve. But it's about, can Steve Williams knock off the old man? Is he good enough yet? Can he get past this Gaijin star, the guy who's been top of the Gaijin tree in All Japan for 15 years? Is he the man yet? And that's what this match is about. And that's the fascinating draw of this match. It's the same formula as Hansen and Ueno today, and they're doing the same things like 30 years ago. But that's what makes wrestling great to me. This is the kind of match I really enjoy because I don't have to think about it too much. It's just who's got what it takes to get the job done in this particular time period. And Hansen and Williams, who are both as tough as they come. And it's Oklahoma versus Texas. It's Oklahoma versus West Texas State. It's every rivalry you can imagine in mid-southern United States sports, all wrapped up into one, taking place at Budokan Hall. Oh. What do you think of this one, Marcus? Because this is another special match, but it is just on a different kind of level of toughness in many respects.
It's interesting, and going back just for 1 second about Minoru, it's interesting, like I just said, that so much of the pain he was in when he was on the offensive. And maybe you could tell me just about Minoru, because obviously you've been watching him for majority of his career. so much about the intimidation factor since I've gotten a chance to watch Minoru Suzuki is no matter how offense he takes from his opponent, his
No, that's
expression never
true.
changes. You don't know. Like it has to be some form of torture for his opponents, like that grandpa devil smile on his face. Like nothing worked on this guy, and it's one of his constant intimidation factors as an opponent. And he could be dripping sweat, and it never shows. And so
No,
it's one of those great things. Like he's one of those guys that can really get off with that and really just drop his why the granddad thing is such an apropos title.
it is, and it's intriguing as well. Is like Suzuki came back to pro wrestling, not in New Japan where he started, but he came back to pro wrestling after his mixed martial arts career in All Japan in the period just after this, and really kind of relearnt his trade as a pro wrestler in this kind of storytelling environment. And you see that now in the matches he's having in DDT, which is kind of, DDT is a fun, happy comedy promotion, but there's some serious wrestlers in there. There's some pro like Shinya Aiki, there's some guys who can go. And Suzuki's job has been get the kids over, make them look like superstars, and he's done that job as international champion. And his big blow off is he gets Ueno, and Ueno goes 25 minutes with him and beats him with a frog splash. And it's like you've done the job. This is Hansen's job here, right? Hansen's job is to like make Dr. Death look like a killer. Can he survive Stan Hansen? That's the basic principles here. And yeah, you're right. Suzuki didn't have any change in his facial expression until he got pinned, and then he was in disbelief that he let this kid beat me.
Yeah.
Can't believe I let this kid beat me. But yeah, that's he's superb.
Then at that point, it's like all referees.
Yeah, it was fantastic. Said you're welcome back anytime, Minoru. You're just too good. And it was like, yeah, proper wrestling. Anyway, let's get back to this one. What's your thoughts on this one, Marcus? Because this is so stiff and so kind of in the same mold as the Kawada match, but obviously Williams is a different kettle of
Yeah, it'll be almost like a misstatement to call it just a straight up and down wrestling match. It really wasn't. It felt like two guys, like two neighbors who really just couldn't had to, go out in the backyard and get everything off their chest physically. This was another one of those things where it's like a brawl
Yeah.
in the best kind of way. Like nobody was trying to do anything. It wasn't the point of this. And like you said, could he, survive the older guy, and he had a little bit of finesse in there, but it's like you really don't have time to make nothing look pretty when you trying to. And it's funny because he was talking in the arm, but it felt like he was talking in the wrong arm. I'm like, that's not the clothes thing that works. Anything that works at this point. Using a dragon sleeping in a rope is just that's
It is. It just is. Actually, Williams would take a break from All Japan Pro Wrestling, go to WCW with Terry Gordy, where the Miracle Violence Connection would become NWA and WCW World Tag Team Champions not long after this. He would go. He was like Baba's favorite son. The door was always open for Williams, which is understandable because he had the whole package really going on, and that's what makes this a fascinating match as well. Can we move on to the next one, sir? And we're going to skip forward. We're back at Budokan Hall. It's 1992. It's August 27th, and Stan Hansen is your Triple Crown champion, and he's defending against Mitsuhiro Misawa. And this is Misawa's trip to the top of the mountain. This is a 2-year story since he dropped the mask of Tiger Mask and moved up to the heavyweight division. It's a 2-year story of him breaking up his team with Kawada to concentrate on singles wrestling and to basically have this long-term goal of being Triple Crown champion. And that's basically where we're at with this. This is the whole thing for Misawa. Misawa lives and breathes for those 3 belts. That's his whole entire level of existence. And the man who's got the belts is Stan Hansen, a man he's never beat. And that's the story. That's where you're at. And there's again 14,000 fans in Budokan Hall, and it's Stan the Lariat Hansen, and he runs to the ring like he owns the place, because he does. And he runs to the ring like he's the toughest man on earth, because he is. And he runs to the ring knowing that he can't be beat because no one has. And here's Misawa looking calm, confident, and ready to go against this monster he's seen destroy everyone.
Yeah, because I mean,
This is a
look,
piece of work,
having a
Marcus,
strategy,
isn't
I'm
it?
gonna just keep this guy in the headlock for the rest of his life is a strategy. It certainly is. It's a choice against Hansen. It's a choice. It's like I'm not gonna try to break this guy down like talking about it or whatnot. I'm really just gonna keep him in an eternal headlock. And then you see Hansen like gets out of it and just immediately starts a barrage of headbutt, and then does this thing. Like it's one of the fun things about watching this playlist is just seeing just how guys would go about trying to break Hansen down and what would be the thought process of it. Because it's really, like I said, you're not gonna out tough him. If you're not on his side, try to break the guy down and be real smart about it and know that
No.
if he gets back to his feet or you don't have your hands on him, you're really gonna have to be really careful about dealing with him because it's just like, putting his feet, dropping. I'm surprised if you on the ground and just start kicking. Yeah, it's just really interesting seeing like what would be the breaking down somebody who really didn't have a lot of holes in their game because he really could just adapt. And even if you do target the arm, he's gonna find a way to come back to it. Even if that arm is practically dead, he's gonna find a way uh to get back to it, which you appreciate in guys that seem like they have that kind of
No.
tenacity and that grit today, like guys like the Shamouses, the Gunther, stuff like that, who really feel like they had that toughness and that grit. That you really have to strategize because just out toughing guys like that is just an exercise in futility. So um, yeah, watching Masawa here is like it's really to say he never beat him as triple champion. It's just something you had to do. And like I said, Stan always the belt of making him the top of the heap with as much of a like I said, a pillar of you know difficulty that he was. It's the same thing to me. Like if you make when they put titles on each heat, like he's already like the tester of guys. But then you make him the champion, it takes it to another level.
With the belts and something on the line is a sight to behold because he just doesn't back down. He doesn't slow down. And it's intriguing
Yeah,
because we watched the match with Kawada, and Kawada's idea is just ever go forward, right? It's just like kicks and strikes and suplexes and as much action as I can make. And then Misawa's approach to it is completely different. It's like, I'm just going to hold on to a headlock and just keep this tiger by its tail and go as far as I possibly can, and then we'll start talking about breaking things down, right? But if I keep him on the mat, he can't hurt me. And if I keep him on the mat for long enough, he might pass out. And if he doesn't pass out, well, then we're going to plan B. My plan B is pretty good. It's good enough to beat Stan Hansen, but as plan Bs go, it's intriguing as well because it layers up this idea of the King's Road style of booking of like you have to have a different approach with each guy. You can't just like go at it. You've got to go at it in a realistic sense. If this was, if we're off to a fight, how's it going to work? And Misawa is the classic of that. I mean, the fans adore him, obviously.
absolutely.
He's in
And following
the
up a
kind of
drop
like
kick with a
point where
3%.
he's going to be compared to Hulk
Yeah,
Hogan in
it's
terms of popularity and
at this
oaks.
point like you really just makes you
And
switch up your thinking on
he's
the fly. 'Cause,
Baba's right hand man. He's
like
the
you're not
guy that
even
Baba
expecting a
puts
drop
all
kick,
his
and it's
chips
funny
on.
because
But he also
you think
has
that the
backup
narrative would be
in
to
the
target
sense
Stan
of there's
Hansen on,
Kawada and
like
there's
he piss him
Taiyu and
off enough, he starts
there's
targeting your
Hibashi
arm like
there
you
as
don't want
well.
the clothesline,
So
and
there's
then
quite a crew coming for Stan
so
Hansen, isn't there, in this rest of this playlist?
no, give me the skinny.
It is, absolutely. Yeah. The next match
Yeah, that's got a
is
McMahon all
a
over
tag
it.
team match, and it is from January. Give me a year. I think it's 1993. It must be 1993. It is Stan Hansen and John Nord. Do you know who John Nord is, Marcus? If you go back to your childhood, you may remember a WWE wrestler called the Berserker who thought he was a Viking and stabbed people with a sword. It was, yes, absolutely. It is retired car salesman John Nord. Not kidding. He was working on a car lot selling
Oh,
cars before he became a professional wrestler. He's tagging with Stan Hansen.
that definitely
As you can
sounds like the
imagine,
faction of villains
not
in the
Stan's most
anime, the
glorious of
Holy
tag team
Demon
partners,
Army.
but perfectly serviceable for the situation involved. Because they're going up against the greatest named team, apart from the Miracle Violence connection, of the two of the four pillars, Akira Teiyu and Toshiaki Kawada. Better known as the Holy Demon Army. Because that's the best tag team name ever, doesn't it? It doesn't get any better than that, does it? Absolutely. The Holy Demon Army. The Holy Demon Army would be the most dominant tag team in All Japan Pro Wrestling history. It would win the World Tag Team Championship 7 times. And this is them just becoming the best tag team in the world at that particular time, or at least the best tag team in All Japan. Teiyu is the oldest of the 4 pillars, and Teiyu's one of those guys who's looked about, in the same way as Hansen, like, Teiyu's looked 40 years old since he was 23, right? And Hansen has looked pretty much 45 years old since he was 27. They just don't age because they were really old when they started. So it's intriguing watching these two because Teiyu was as technically gifted as Misawa, though not quite as popular, and he was as tough as Kawada, and about the same level of popularity of Kawada. Hence why they became the dominant tag team, really. So it's interesting to see Teiyu's approach. He's much more of a classical wrestler, and we're in a tag team situation here. And John Nord's trying his best, bless him, but it's Stan doing the work. Because Stan's got to wrestle these guys every week, and John Nord does not. So Stan's kind of like having to do the main shift here because he's trying to get these guys over. That's the job. We're going to build these guys into being the tag team in All Japan Pro Wrestling. So as a result of that, he's kind of got to like do the work because
absolutely.
Stan's
Like
the
we
dominant
always,
force of the
like I
company,
always say
right?
here,
So
like
he's
tag
got to be the
team
one that
wrestling
helps
is
move
a
things
you know
along.
art
And
within an art
Teiyu and
form.
Kawada
It's its
are
own thing.
the prototypical kind of like
Particularly when you got
all up and down basics tag team. Cut the ring off,
even
quick
if you got
tags,
guys
double
that's
team
tagging with
maneuvers.
similar
They are
styles,
kind of an FTR of their
it's
age.
its
Would
own
you
thing. But
agree,
you got guys
Marcus?
with different styles or different sizes, and where they go about doing things like that tag team, the way FTR does it, two of the best to do it today, where you cut that ring off, keep the tags frequent, keep the guy just exhausted and cut off from the ring at every possible point, even if it's a skill within a skill set. So, I mean, it's really cool to people, like you said, they were the aces of the promotion in a way. And it's funny you was going down those ages when you was like, it looked like he was in his 40s when he was in his 20s. Like that's how I guess so many of us over here felt about Morgan Freeman. Um, and it's interesting because not like we always felt like he was an older guy, but now he's getting older, and it's like wow. So it's like it's not. Sometimes you just have people that just age like that, and it's funny you saying that about with Japanese performers. Like they don't look old until they really get old. In wrestling, which I would imagine tends to age you, considering on just the toughness of it. But yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, absolutely. Because also you have to put in mind, like John Nord in WWE was also kind of like doing a Bruiser Brody impression, so he's kind of a good match for Stan Hansen. But yeah, this was an interesting one, and especially kind of shows off where we are with the Holy Demon Army. They're just on the rise as a tag team. They would have incredible matches with each other as well. But this one's just kind of a little snapshot of what's going on. So let's move on to the next one because this is a snapshot of what's going as well. A very young Yun Akiyama, not quite a young boy, a little bit higher than that, but certainly in his first singles match with Stan Hansen, Yun Akiyama still going at 56 years of old, 56 years of age. Kind of the stalwarts of DDT these days. He has an incredibly varied career. Started in All Japan, was part of the exodus that went to Noah, went back to All Japan, and then left All Japan as chief booker to go to DDT and work for Cyberfight again, and kind of what's the word? He's kind of the senior mentor of the pro wrestlers in DDT. More than willing to do the silly stuff in DDT as a serious long-term veteran, but you watch him wrestle now, and he's no
Yeah,
slower.
again, it's not good, but again, you got to know what you can, kind of know when to hold him and fold him type of deal. He at that size, he just can't be trading with Hansen with those strikes and those kicks and whatnot. You're not gonna last. So yeah, but I don't necessarily know if taking him to the outside is a good thing because outside he's gonna use everything, throw you into everything, and like you said, those buildings were built a certain kind of way. So the only cushion you was gonna get was the mat, which I would imagine was very thin.
Yes. He basically plays basketball with Akiyama's liver through most of this match. It's a remarkable beating. It's a beautiful beating. It's a glorious beating. It's the kind of character building exercise that makes Yuni Akiyama the man who hates rookies to this day. So yes. But it's got some. You've got all of the Akiyama youth exuberance there that he kind of puts in, and he's gamely trying to get an exploder suplex off Stan Hansen. And it just doesn't work. But it's a fun snapshot of where Stan was and where Akiyama was. He does land a Northern Light suplex that is superb, and you can see all of the talents that is there. But that's 1994 Stan Hansen. So we'll move on because there's not a lot in that match. This one is a bit more like important. We're in what year are we in? I think we're in 1995. No, 1994 again. And it's Real World Tag League.
Yeah.
And Stan's now tagging with Takeo Omori.
It's just interesting because one guy sounds like he's an assassin, the other guy sounds like somebody who
bizarre tag team.
You really focused on a conversation of giving you their card.
And the homicidal, suicidal, genocidal maniac
Gary Albright.
Because of course, when I think of Gary Albright, my instant thought process is, why don't we get an aerial brawler to tag with this straight up shooter? That'll work wonderfully well.
Opponent.
But whoever thought of that, you were not wrong.
Somebody
it was a glorious thing. What did you think of this one, Marcus? Because this is a bit weird.
In effect, just destruction in his own way, even of itself. Somebody who was homicidal, genocidal, going against somebody who is pretty much, seemingly killed a lot of people, metaphorically speaking, in that ring. When it comes to the way that he, executes a lot of his matches, so that's the interesting combination I didn't see coming. Like that's almost like the perfect combination. Like I said, it would have been really cool to see them go 1-on-1, like Sabu. That's the thing. Not too many. You go against somebody like Stan, you're gonna inevitably get hurt, but Sabu takes that to a different level. And anybody that will, he did to tape his ribs back is somebody who.
This match intrigues me just from the level of it. This is just like, what were they thinking? Takoko Amore would end up being a major draw for All Japan. Go to Noah in the Noah Exodus, become a major draw for Noah. Would leave Noah under auspicious circumstances. He was kind of let go after he was unfairly treated. I have to say, with myself and Alex Watt discussed this. He was in a main event feud, and people in the Noah organization didn't think he tried hard enough, basically, and he was let go after that. They didn't trust. Basically, Misawa sent him on excursion and didn't call him back. So he went back to All Japan and then joined Wrestle One as part of when Muta left to form his own company. So he had an interesting career, probably cut short by politics more than anything else. And I find him a fascinating wrestler because he's such a good wrestler. Like at this point in his career, he's kind of like close to his rookie year. And the fact that he's tagging with Stan Hansen shows you the faith Baba had in him. It's like, all right, he's going to be one of the guys. They don't want to stick him with Hansen for no apparent reason. He's got to be able to carry the weight, right? Look at the partners Hansen's had. He's had Ted DiBiase, Bruiser Brody, Dan Spivey, all of those guys. Terry Gordy at one point as well. He's got to have someone who can go. And so Amori is, kind of in a mold closer to Hansen and Brody than the other guys on the Japanese roster. So I find him a really fascinating pick at this particular point. And he clearly learns from Hansen all the way through this match. And he becomes, as he gets older, he kind of takes on that Hansen kind of role within All Japan as a serious heavyweight contender.
And sadly, that's where I have to leave this week's Treatment Show. Due to technical difficulties, we just couldn't get the rest of the show recorded. What happened was, me and Marcus talked about another 40 minutes, but listening back to the playback before I posted this show, it was dreadful. Marcus was talking over me, I was talking over Marcus, there was long gaps of nothingness, so it seems that the file corrupted. So we will continue the story of Stan the Lariat Hansen at another time. Thank you very much for listening to the Troopany Show today. You can find me at Sheriff Lone Star on Twitter and on Instagram, or Sheriff Lone Star TX on Instagram, Mastodon, and on PixelFed and everywhere on the internet. You can find Marcus over on Twitter as Paradox Kid, and you find the Troopany Show on Blue Sky, Twitter, and on Instagram as Troopany Show. Please like, subscribe, and listen, especially if you're watching on YouTube and Spotify. Take care, and we'll see you soon. Bye.